Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. Today's edition, I want to go back to Sunday's magnificent Gent-Wevelgem race in 2024. Now, there was a bunch of knuckleheads in this race and just amateur racing if you're just trying to win the race. If you're looking at getting UCI points, if you're looking at giving yourself a shot at winning the stage, then you can say it was some expert riding. But if you're riding under the team rules when you sign contracts, it's always to have teams win the race, and you have to do whatever you can to help your teammate win the race. Now, Gent-Wevelgem has multiple bergs on today's 253-kilometer race, about 155 miles, but they'll all end with about 35 kilometers to go when they go over the Kemmelberg. Now, that's the last and final climb, and then we're talking about basically flat roads all the way into the finish. When the cameras come on, it's 120 kilometers to go. The race is blown up. There's 4 echelons. There's a break of 8 riders up the front. But when we look at the first group, it's really set up with a selection of solid riders up there. Tim Miller's up there, the pseudo quick-step sprinter. We see Mathieu van der Poel's up there in the Road World Championship jersey. And then we got at least 3 Trek riders in there because Mads Pedersen's in there. He's a big-time favorite here. He's got, of course, Jonathan Milan, who's already been winning this season. And then we see that the Stuyvens is in there. So 3 guys from Trek. Good numbers, about a 30-rider split up there when it's all broken up. But there's still 8 riders to catch up the front that have Michael Morkov up there. Now, I want to point one thing out when they're catching Michael Morkov. Look how he's moving the group all the way over to the left side of the road. That's because he knows in the echelon, when the wind coming from the right to the left, he wants everybody to be on the left side. So the group of favorites behind, when they catch, they have to come around them. When they come around and the wind's blowing this way, it'll give them a draft as soon as the group of favorites come around on the right side. They get a draft, which makes it easy for you to slot in. You never want to be on the right side of the road when the wind's coming right to left. I learned that the hard way my first years of racing crosswinds in 1997 with FDJ, as groups were coming flying right by me and I couldn't get into the draft and kept getting popped. And after 2 times of getting popped, I learned my lesson the first day of crosswinds there while riding for FDJ. So good thing to point out right there, and good lesson for the pro riders to take, for the young pro riders that are trying to make it up in the big times. When you're coming from the US, there's no crosswinds. Listen to Michael Morkov. If it's coming right to left, go to the left. Now, everything we're going to focus on is about 88 kilometers to go. They're up basically on the Monteberg, and we see Trek there with 5 riders in the front, and they're going curb to curb. We'll see Stuyvens, he's looking back over his shoulder, and he sees the second group coming together. He doesn't care about the second group. Those guys are hurt, and their legs are smashed back there, and the peloton has been in pieces, like I told you, from 120 kilometers to go, coming together, blowing up, coming together, blowing up, coming together. Now we're 88K, and all of a sudden we see 5 Trek guys on the front. All right, then you see Ed Toons. He goes through the front and he starts drilling it because he's got the Kemmelberg coming. That means you have 5 Trek guys at the front, but Mathieu van der Poel's at the front too. You got to look a little bit harder to see his sprinter, Jasper Philipsen, from Albacete to Koenig. He's near the front, but not at it. When they make the left turn and they start the Kemmelberg, Mathieu van der Poel's going to throw an attack with about 85 kilometers to go in the cobblestone climb. He's going to split it. He's drilling it at the front. Mads Pedersen, Trek, is locked onto his wheel. Pithy's going to get up there. Stuyven's going to get up there. Rasmus Tiller is going to get up there. And then we got Van Dijk up there from Visma Lease Bike to have 6 riders in the front group with Jonathan Milan getting up there. Now, Jonathan throws in a massive attack for Trek. This attack's going at about 83 kilometers to go. Mathieu van der Poel is in trouble right now because he's riding the front. Now, there's crosswinds all over, and he's putting guys into the gutter, but the problem is you have Rasmus Tiller in the gutter, you have Van Dijk in the gutter, and you have Pithy in the gutter too, so they can't really help if Mathieu van der Poel already smashed them coming up to Kemmelberg. Now they're still trying to recover from that big-time effort. Remember, it's a 250-kilometer race. We have 85 kilometers to go. These guys have done 180 kilometers already. That's about 110 miles in distance, so they're already tired, and Mathieu van der Poel won't keep them out of the wind. Ideally, you want to keep the 2 Trek riders, Stuyvens and Mads, into the wind, and you want, of course, the other helpers that could help Mathieu van der Poel, you want to keep them echeloned over, and then you want the Trek guys to be in the wind back here in the gutter if the wind's coming from left to right, or right to left the opposite direction. Whichever way the wind's blowing, you want the 2 Trek riders in the back, because you only got Jonathan Milan up solo, so you know the Trek riders aren't going to help, but you want them in the gutter at the back so they're not messing up the rotation like we see Mads and Stuyvens, depending on the point in kilometers, where they're always up there messing up the flow. This means Matthew Van Der Poel has to do a big amount of work. Now, he's a knucklehead right at this moment if he's trying to win the race, because he's got Mads Pedersen sitting on, Stuyven sitting on, even Pithy's not rotating through too much, Rasmussen Tiller's not doing too much, and Van Dijk's not doing too much either. It's basically Matthew Van Der Poel pulling against one Jonathan Milan up the front. Milan's not trying to win Gent-Wevelgem at this point in time. If he can get it, fantastic, he'll take it. But his whole MO at this moment is to stay out as long as he can, so Matthew Van Der Poel has to stay on the front. Now, I called him a knucklehead and even an amateur at this moment, because when you look at the peloton at the back, they're 30 seconds back there, and he has a number of teammates in there, at least 2, if not 3 at this moment. He will have 3 later for sure, but at the moment, he certainly has Jasper Philipsen in there and Søren Kragh Andersen in there, so he could just sit up. You leave Jonathan Milan up there solo, Matthew Van Der Poel. You don't have to do any work. You sit up, you go back to the group. They're 30 seconds back there. Who that's watching this video right now thinks Jonathan Milan can go 80 kilometers all the way to the finish at Gent-Wevelgem all by himself? Not a chance. There's too many teams back there that can chase, and you can bring back Jonathan Milan. And that means at this moment, if Matthew Van Der Poel isn't a knucklehead and sits up and goes back there, he can rest in the group back there. The teams can get organized and start chasing Jonathan Milan, or you can get new attacks with guys that are motivated and can possibly help pull something back. Or you put Albacine de Koonik on the front, the one guy that's not named Jasper Philipsen, and you put him on the front, Søren Kragh Andersen, and that guy drills it, and he brings back Milan, because Jonathan Milan's history here at the one-day big races is not that deep when we're talking about going into 250 kilometers, but of course Matthew Van Der Poel thinks he can bring him back and still win the race. So Matthew Van Der Poel's pulling for 10 kilometers on the front. We get onto this crazy narrow dirt section in the 70-kilometer mark, and you look back there at the peloton, and we'll see Danny Van Poppel throw an attack for Bora Hansgrohe. This was ridiculous. He doesn't need to do this. The best thing you want right now is you want Matthew Van Der Poel out there pulling all by himself. You want Jonathan Milan out there pulling by himself and wearing up Trek a little bit. You got Mads Pedersen sitting on. We're on this narrow road, which isn't good. That's not an ideal tactic. Great for Trek, not good for anybody else, because Mads Pedersen has to be the #2 favorite here when Gent-Wevelgem started proper. But Bora Hansgrohe's Danny Van Poppel, this is a knucklehead move too, because what would you do when you even got up there? You want to go back to the peloton, you want to stay in numbers, you want to work together, and you want to leave Matthew Van Der Poel up there doing big hits. Now, we're still on this small road. We're going to see Matthew Van Der Poel drill it on the front. Guys, he has blown it up on this small, dirty farm road right here with a slight rise. As we see, Mads Pedersen's locked on his wheel. Pithy from FDJ, he's doing a solid right here, but you see him a little bit gapped. He will find his way back on. Stuyven's gapped, but he'll find his way back on to put 4 up front. But Rasmus Tiller, X, is going to get dropped. And along with Rasmus Tiller, we're going to see Van Dijk get dropped from Visma Lease Bike. With those guys going back, remember at this point in time, if you're Matthew Van Der Poel, you're at the front, you did a big hit. Milan's up there, he's working hard, but you got Mads Pedersen and Stuyven's getting a free ride. Now, after Matthew Van Der Poel does this big hit, and we see the 4 riders come together, he's still about 20 seconds thereabouts off of the time of Jonathan Milan up front, and then he's going to get a lucky card. He pulled a luck card here when Stuyven's flatted, and he goes out the back of the group because that's -1 Trek rider, and that Trek rider, Stuyven's, was getting a free ride, and clearly he's on pretty decent form. So keep that in mind. Stuyven's is out of the picture now, but we still see that, of course, Pithy's in this group. Matthew Van Der Poel's still drilling it on the front, and it'll take him until just over 60 kilometers to go when he brings back Jonathan Milan. That's 20 kilometers in the front, pulling one specially on form Mads Pedersen. We know he's on form because we've seen him doing good. He's already won throughout this 2024 season. So for 20 kilometers, Mads Pedersen's sitting on getting a free ride. Now here's the next knucklehead move. And I'm going to call this a knucklehead move from Mads Pedersen, and I'm going to call it a knucklehead move from Matthew Van Der Poel, because Mads throws in this big attack. He throws in attack, and at this moment, if you're Mads Pedersen with just over 55 kilometers to go and you're throwing in this attack after you brought back Jonathan Milan, who's hurting, if Jonathan Milan gets dropped, that means you only have 1 track up there. So you had 3 to begin with. Jonathan Milan, of course, is tired from 20 kilometers of solo, but if he gets dropped, you lose him. You have Pithy that's been sitting on. Matthew Van Der Poel is getting tired. But Matthew Van Der Poel's a knucklehead here because even with this moment after he spent 20 kilometers on the front, let Mads Pedersen go. The field back there with multiple Alpecin de Koenig riders in there, at least 3 now at this point in time, with one being called Jasper Philipsen, who won Milan-San Remo. You can sit up Mathieu van der Poel at this moment and let Mads Pedersen go. What's Mads going to do up there? He's got a ton of kilometers to still continue the ride on the front, and he is their best, fastest sprinter for Trek. So if he wants to go out there and burn his legs, shut it down, Mathieu van der Poel, bring the group back to the peloton, and the peloton still has tons of time to catch Mads Pedersen. Instead, Mathieu van der Poel brings him back as he's a knucklehead, and Mads Pedersen's up there as a knucklehead too. Now, you know someone's going to be a knucklehead and still be able to win today's race because I'm calling everybody a knucklehead. Bora Hansgrohe's a knucklehead for chasing. Mathieu van der Poel is. FDJ's back there blocking left and right, which isn't so bad, but that's Stefan Kuhn back there. We don't know exactly where Pithy's form is. We're going to find out soon. But he looks okay, but remember, he's not rotating on the front, so he must be a little bit in the red. And when he starts rotating on the front, that's when I'll call him a knucklehead, because you got Mathieu van der Poel up here, and you got Mads Pedersen, which seems like a bad idea if you don't have experience of going 250 kilometers at one of these big-time classic races. So we start looking up front. We're going to see Jonathan Milan get dropped on the Monteberg, and that's going to leave 3 guys up front. Pithy's still holding on for dear life. Mathieu van der Poel's coming through. Mads Pedersen's coming through. And Pithy, like I said, a little bit of a knucklehead because he's riding through with the 2 strongest riders up here in Gent-Wevelgem. Now, their gap's still only at about 22 seconds. The next knuckleheads, when we start looking at the peloton behind, we see there's a ton of Intermarché riders. I counted at least 5 when we start getting further down deep into this Gent-Wevelgem race here, and they're sending attacks going up the road with Hugo Page and Ben Turner. Now, we'll see at the last and final climb, the Kemmelberg, they're coming up the opposite way now. We'll see that they're going full gas at the front. Pithy's going to get dropped. We got 2 riders going solo. We got Pithy getting dropped. We got Hugo Page that has his sprinter back there, Biniam Gourmet, and 3 other teammates. So there's 4 Intermarchés back there. There's Ben Turner along with Hugo Page, the knucklehead that's trying to chase. They'll catch up to Pithy after he got dropped on the last and final climb. And we got about 27 kilometers to go, 25 kilometers to go. And we'll see up front that the 2 riders, they don't have a ton of time. I mean, we're talking about 40, 50 seconds to the peloton. We got Pithy getting caught, and we have 4 riders there when Pithy got caught because one other rider got on, the Total Energy rider, Anthony Turgis. Now, those guys keep pulling. Hugo Page is still pulling. I don't know why. His sprinter's in the back group there, and they're not going to catch the 2 riders up front. They finally get caught with 14 kilometers to go, the group of 4, and Intermarché still don't get on the front. Bora Hansgrohe's finally on the front working well. Visma Lease Bike is on the front doing what they can. And we see Pseudo Quickstep, who have been doing a ton of work throughout this stage, especially Casper Asgreen early in the chasing when he was the only rider on the front and none of the other teams would help him chase. But now we see Pseudo Quickstep up there. So 3 teams chasing, about a minute gap up to the 2 leaders. And there's 5 Intermarché riders in there with Biniam Gourmet all sitting on, not getting in the front. You guys are knuckleheads. 5 guys, Biniam Gourmet in this final group, and you're not getting on the front helping Ineos, Visma Lease Bike, Pseudo Quickstep up there pulling along with Bora Hansgrohe on the front. You're going to sit back there with 5. We're going to come under about 5 kilometers to go. The gap is about 40 seconds. And we look at the back of the peloton at 5 kilometers to go. One of the Intermarché riders is sitting back there stretching his leg and his back right now instead of being at the front pulling as hard as he possibly can. We come under 3 kilometers to go, same thing. Intermarché's at the back. We come under about 1.5 kilometers to go. We'll see there it's Mathieu van der Poel on the front. He's going to pull up to just about 1.2 kilometers to go. Then we're going to see Mads get on the front. Mads is going to ease up off the pedal. That's why we see the gap coming down to the peloton back there. If it was a hurry, they'd still be pulling hard and working well together up front. But Mads Pedersen knows he's the sprinter, so he wants to lead from the front. Mathieu van der Poel's okay with that because he's got Jasper Philipsen in the back group there for all day long. Could have sat up all day long, but didn't. Now we got Mads Pedersen on the front. He goes under the 1K. He's going to start looking over his shoulder at 700, 400 meters to go, 300 meters to go. He's going to start his kick at about 200 meters to go. Not 290, not 300 like we saw at Paris-Nice, but at just around 200 meters to go, he starts his kick. 100 meters to go, we see Mathieu van der Poel's going to move out to the left. He's going to start his acceleration on Mads Pedersen. He's going to come up slightly to the side of him, but not quite in front of him. Then his legs are going to blow with about 50, 30 meters to go. Mads Pedersen's going to know he's winning at 25 meters to go, and he's going to celebrate a big-time victory here for Trek. Now, when I look at this and I cut up all the details about it, I don't like it. If I go back to the field sprint, we see it's Bora Hansgrohe that wins the podium spot here at Ghent, and that's Jordi Mayus. He won on the Champs last year at the Tour de France, the last and final sprint of the 23 Tour de France. So magnificent sprinter here. He ends up getting third. And of course, Jasper Philipsen finishes there, top 5, top 6. But when I dissect this race, if Mathieu van der Poel was actually sole objective is to win this race, I don't know what he's doing. It doesn't make any sense. When Jonathan Milan's up the road solo, just sit up, go back to the group. You don't have to do anything, Mathieu van der Poel. Sit up. If you don't have help, if you had help back there, let's say Pithy was rolling through, Tiller was rolling through, let's say Tim Van Dijk was rolling through, okay, you keep rolling through because it's not that bad. But if you're going to be the sole rider pulling on the front and no one else is helping you for 20 kilometers and then you think you're going to drop Mads Pedersen, there was one part with about 28 kilometers to go, I think it was, where Mathieu van der Poel's sign had come up, not a sign, a statistic had come up on the screen where it said he won 80% of the time when he went to the finish line with just one other rider. So 2 riders, Mathieu van der Poel wins 80% of the time. I wonder what that statistic was when we're at Gent-Wevelgem, where it's 35 kilometers flat all the way to the finish after the Dutchy rider was pulling for 20 kilometers, won Mads Pedersen on his wheel. I bet it's not 80% then. So he's a knucklehead. Mads Pedersen, it worked out perfect for you, and your team were fantastic in terms of as a group. You got a little bit unlucky there, of course, when Stuyven's flatted out. But you got really lucky that Mathieu van der Poel wanted to pull you nonstop for 20 kilometers. And when you attacked solo with still about 50 kilometers to go in today's Gent-Wevelgem, that was really a knucklehead move, because if Mathieu van der Poel decided to just sit up and still go back to the peloton, you're caught and your legs are done. Better idea would have been never to attack Mathieu van der Poel, leave it up to Jonathan Milan to attack. Stuyven's, of course, if he was still there, you'd leave him attacking because you're the pure sprinter. So Mads Pedersen, in the future, don't ever attack on the climbs. I know you won today's race and you're like, hey, winner means that I did everything right. I won a ton of races and I still did a ton of things wrong during those races that I won. And Mads Pedersen, his tactics were wrong today, but luckily for him, Mathieu van der Poel's tactics were absolutely amateurish in today's race, and that was knuckleheadism. Mads Pedersen, you got lucky there, of course, with Mathieu van der Poel always chasing you down with over 50 kilometers to go. I don't know where you thought you were going solo without a Mathieu van der Poel all the way to the finish of today's race, and you were the only pure sprinter. So I know you won the race, but when we really dissected, if Intermarché put any guys on the front, you probably weren't winning. If Bora Hansgrohe had put guys on the front earlier instead of having Danny Van Poppel chasing like crazy, if somebody had helped Casper Asgreen early, everything would have got brought back together. And certainly if Mathieu van der Poel just let you right off the front, your legs were done and there's no way you're going to win this race. The tactics throughout Ghent were absolutely horrendous, but they are fun to watch. So make sure you guys like and subscribe, because I'll see you on Beyond the Coverage real soon.